We're going to take up the topic of machine learning. Let me ask Charity and Ben to come up. It's one of the buzzwords of the last few years has been AI and machine learning. We've tended to concatenate the two, unfortunately, but they are distinct. And we wanted to drill particularly into the topic of, actually, yeah, Ben, closer to me. We're just going to do an alphabetical order for the cameras at home. Okay. So we sort of want to tease out these terms a little more precisely, understand, especially sort of go from the general to the specific about what they mean to you. How many of you believe that somewhere in your organization you're already implementing machine learning of some kind within your marketing? Okay. And anybody want to tell me how? Give me an example.
We're optimizing creative in real time. Hold on.
Okay.
That's the professor in Steve Smith asking for you now to back up your hand raising.
Right.
Yes, that's right. Well
there
done.
You go.
It's Sarah.
We're optimizing creative in real time, so we're looking at actually what's working, sunsetting what's not.
Okay. Anybody else?
Oh, back here.
Yeah.
Hi there. I'm Carly London from Dollar Shave Club. So we do use machine learning in our email campaigns. We do have a variety of products, over 30 products. So we use machine learning in emails for Box Manager to show them the products that they're most likely to add to their next box.
Okay. All right. We're going to talk about some other examples as well. And let me start by having Ben and Charity introduce themselves. Both Austin natives now, right?
Close.
Close. You're close. You're San Antonio. I'm sorry.
I'm Ben Gaddis. I'm the president of an agency here in Austin called T3. So we're one of the largest digital agencies left that's independent in the space. So we get to work with some amazing clients like our friend Steven from 7-Eleven who talked yesterday, Capital One, Allstate, sorry, and Pizza Hut. So and I've been lucky enough to work on a lot of the AI-based projects, and we'll talk about some of those today.
Charity Webb, USAA. I'm responsible for all paid media related to the bank. I come from Cabela's, so I have digital expertise on that side, and then I've spent about 7-8 years on the agency side as well.
So let's first, we're talking about machine learning today, so let's distinguish it. What's the difference between it and AI?
So simplest form, and I think this is where most people get confused. So AI, think about it at the general level. So machine learning is actually a form of artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is essentially machines trying to gather intelligence, and machine learning is a way that they go about doing that. So in the past, we've actually had to program outcomes. So we would actually discreetly try to program a computer language to deliver an output, and that's scalable only up to a point because you actually have to set a base set of rules, and you can only scale that to a point. What machine learning does is actually you give the program, you actually ask it to program another program. So it's looking for, instead of outcomes, the output of machine learning is a model that itself learns.
Yeah, the only addition I would add to that is within AI you have applied and generalized, and applied is you have a specific task that you want that model or algorithm to accomplish, and then generalized is, as he described, is it gets smarter over time, and more data makes that machine more smarter over time to create additional models.
Let's talk from the inside out, from the organization out. Before we start talking about how this works directly with consumers, let's talk about how machine learning can improve marketing departments themselves, how they work, how it can help everybody do their job a little more effectively.
I think scale. So think about how much time you're spending today trying to optimize based on segments, based on targeting and personalization, and we've almost become paralyzed where there's just not enough time in the day to do that, and so machines have to help us do that. And so you're seeing a lot of, Salesforce does a great job. There's a million platforms out there that really help us optimize the experience. But what machines don't do a great job of is creative thinking. And so the opportunity I see is that machine learning combined with human creativity allows us to get back to the things that we do best, allow the machines to do what they do best, and really create a much broader capability inside a marketing organization.
Yeah, that's a great description. I would say, too, yesterday we talked about little data. humans can understand and work through little data, but where we need machines is to dive through the big data and provide us insights based off of that.
Yeah, and imagine trying to identify patterns in, you know, in a data set that has 1 billion different data points. I mean, you just can't do that. But when the machine understands that pattern, all it really sees is a pattern. It doesn't know what to do with that pattern yet. And if you feed it data and it learns, it can get better and better, but the human insight on top of that pattern is today much more viable than a machine ever will be.
So do you see this over time altering marketing roles, where there are particular sets of tasks that we're now doing manually that will be designated to machines, either leaving more room or changing the roles of marketers?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the entire face of a marketing org has to change. And the question becomes, where does something like machine learning and AI sit? Is it a marketing function? Is it an IT function? Is it something that sits over the top? And so I think as a marketer, you're going to see that a lot of the reporting that we do, a lot of the analysis will actually be provided more through dashboards that machines look at. And then what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to understand that. So you're going to need more data scientists, but you're going to need people who can not just analyze the data, because the machines will really do that, but can turn that into some sort of actionable output that is valuable and that is really based on a creative idea.
I have nothing else to add to that.
Well, okay, I'm a little curious about the problem with a lot of these technologies is they quickly seem like or feel like black boxes. And so I'm curious if you foresee the ways in which we have this dashboard, but we also need to be able to dig into it to start directing it in specific ways, to glean from it whatever intelligence it's rendering, but also be able to manipulate it in reliable ways, have some understanding of what's actually going on in the process so we can tease it out and make it do what we want it to do.
I think on top of that, there's all these different data sources, and you have mixed marketing models, you have attribution models, you have last touch models, ad servers, all of these directional tools to help tell you a story, and the methodology behind those you have to be in alignment on. And if you're not in alignment on, it's a waste of funding. So it's a fragmented space, I would say, that you as a marketing organization and an organization holistically have to be in alignment just on the directional use case and the scientific methodology behind it.
So you need to understand the technology enough to make judgments about what it can do and what it can't do and where it needs to go.
Yeah, you have to. And I think not only that, to get started, you have to understand the technology enough to determine what you should point it at, because that is the biggest challenge that AI faces today. And there are just skews of just bodies, dead bodies all over organizations today of people who come in and say, AI can do this or AI can do that, but then they try to apply it like a general AI in that format, and it just doesn't work. And so I think what marketing organizations have to do is figure out what is the specific problem or data set that you're going to point AI, or in this case machine learning, towards. What do you want to get out of that? What's the specific objective? And once you do that, you can tell whether you were successful or not. But if you don't even understand what it could do, I mean, you can't just go, we'll just sprinkle some AI on that, and it just gets better. It doesn't really work that way, unfortunately.
Good pivot to examples. So let's drill into some good examples of messaging that's been informed by the technology and what it was pointed at to solve and how it solved it.
Yeah, I would say USAA today is more of is at the customization stage. So if you log into our website, we know you as a user, we can customize to you. We're not at that personalization stage when you're talking about media execution. Whereas at Cabela's, we did a very good job at the personalization stage based off of dynamic creative optimization and tools of that nature. So I would say today as it stands, there's a wide breadth of advertisers that need to do personalization well with AI from a dynamic perspective, whereas in some use cases, it's not as applicable.
Yeah, I mean, we're working with a partner of ours, big restaurant, 15, 20 million members in their CRM loyalty program, and we can dynamically target at an amazing level based on 50, 60 different variables, what you've bought in the past, when you bought, what type of products you buy, do you buy for your family or not, and we can alter those so that the next email you get is more targeted and relevant, and of course the conversion rates go up. That's kind of interesting, but then when you get onto the site, now we're starting to use more predictive modeling and intelligence to change the products that you see based on that. And that's all pretty interesting, but where I'm more bullish is that's all messaging. I think the opportunity is going a lot farther, which is actually changing the types of experiences that you have. We did a great piece of work with Staples where we partnered with IBM Watson, and so we created a system called the Easy System. So now if you're an office admin, today you have to go about ordering office supplies by a bunch of people putting a sticky note or a post-it note on your desk and telling you that they're pissed off because you already ran out of black Sharpies. Well, we created a system for her that allows her to actually, she has a smart speaker at her desk, much like an Alexa. She can just say, hey, Easy, I need black Sharpies, I need coffee for the break room, and I need that paper we ordered last week. And through natural language processing, we actually determine all of those things, extract the quantity, the item, put that in her cart, and then we use learning to determine whether that was right or not and optimize the process. But she can also then go take a picture of a product and actually send that to us, and we'll just go ahead and send her that item. Or my favorite, she can actually just forward an email that says, I'm looking, somebody sent her an email, she can just forward that to us. We'll actually extract all of that information, add it in her cart, and just send her those items.
Now, are you also using predictive modeling to push what's, to know when things probably are running low, to push? I'm curious about those two scenarios. We just covered two different scenarios. One is using machine learning, and maybe this is the entry level, of hyper-personalization. Of essentially, it's more than personalization, it's individuation of messaging. Yep. Now, you're talking about a different kind of use, the next stage of machine learning, which is simply lessening the friction of the interaction. And then the next stage beyond that is predictive modeling, of really pushing opportunities or anticipating needs.
Yeah, so by understanding, and it is, I think predictive is the next step in personalization, because by truly knowing you, we can understand when you would need something different. And some of it is, the ways that you can go about it are pretty interesting. We actually built a prototype where we just built an office supply closet and just a cabinet, and just like you would see in your office. And instead of doing something completely crazy and trying to outfit it with all these different sensors, we just drew a red line in each cubbyhole. And that meant that what was in that cubbyhole, if you could see the red line, there wasn't enough stuff in that cubbyhole, which meant you should order more of it. And we just took a picture of that every day, posted it on Mechanical Turk, Amazon's platform, and asked people, can you see a red line in this picture or not? And if they could, they said yes, and then we automatically reordered that. Well, we used that data, which is just literally a person clicking yes or no, to train the algorithm to then determine whether or not it could see the red line. So that then learns, and then from at that point, all the algorithm needs is just a picture of the supply closet, and it can predictively reorder. It's not really predicting, it's just analyzing.
Mm-hmm. What have been the key challenges in implementing either hyper-personalization or these kinds of predictive modelings? As you're dealing with the technologies, what have been the key challenges to implementation?
I would say integration, and in an organization like a USAA or like a Cabela's is getting people on board, the politics behind that, and being able to convey in a way the importance. Is it going to provide incremental value, or is it just something we want to use? So I think conveying that, having the data to back it up, and the understanding of the technology at hand is really important.
Yeah, I think the understanding is a great point. You have to have a data set. Machine learning can't do something with nothing. You have to have some sort of data for it to learn from. So you have to have that, and for the most part, it's got to be somewhat structured. So getting your hands on that is sometimes a challenge. But then, to my earlier point, the biggest challenge has been figuring out what is the specific instance or problem that we should point this technology towards, and can we get buy-in from everyone that in this case we may just be testing. Today, we cannot We can't promise that this is going to be the end-all, be-all, but there is value, immense value today in going through with that testing. So I think that's been the biggest challenge, is just getting people from thinking that this is a solve for all problems to really just an incremental improvement on one specific problem.
Let me go back to the integration challenge, because it seems to me that some of the models that we're already talking about require they're going to have a tremendous impact on internal technical operations on the tech stack itself. So tell me a little bit about what sort of challenges anyone who's venturing into this field needs to expect in terms of how and where they actually integrate with existing technical systems.
You have to understand the tech stack that you currently have and if it can take the inputs and outputs of the tech you're trying to bring in. And so it takes someone who has an expertise in the existing and someone who has an expertise in the new, and being able to mesh that picture together to figure out what you need in addition or what you need to remove to make that happen.
And what we found is that there are very few, a lot of people will pitch this, and no offense if you're in this room, but there are very few platforms out there that do it all. Actually, I've yet to see one. I mean, we work with Watson. They're fantastic in certain areas, not great in others. You know, I think Salesforce does a fantastic job in certain areas, and there's other areas where we use like an API.ai or, you know, fill in the blank with some of these platforms. What we're trying to help our clients do is, instead of, you have your systems of record, you have your existing stack, instead of trying to make a bet or go spend $15 or $20 million implementing this big new system, you need to try out each of those individual platforms and see what they're great at. And so the only way that we know how to do that is to try to extract the data out of your systems of record into some sort of middle or microservices layer that allows you to then manipulate it and push it across. And that's more of it's a modern technology framework that a lot of people are moving towards, and most of the, you know, the startups in today's world are operating on. And so if you can do that, then what you have is you have flexibility and portability of data. You can start to run different types of tests and determine what works, and your integration costs and your time frame go way down.
Yeah, I wanted to pivot into the vendors since you guys, everybody here, are being inundated with messages from vendors, all throwing the buzzwords around. So better understanding what, as clients, you need to do, what questions you need to ask of vendors, how they need to come to you more intelligently. Talk a little bit about the vendor relationships and how you're vetting a whole series of options and evaluating technologies that are above most people's heads. Mm-hmm.
I think specific questions are really important for advertisers to ask vendors, because if you're a modeling vendor or a network, something of that nature, you're doing the same thing, but you tell a different story to get to the same thing. So understanding the true differentiator. And 9 times out of 10, the reason why I moved from the agency side to the advertiser side is because I realized advertisers don't know what questions to ask. And so a lot of it comes in just the innate conversation that you're actually having with a vendor. And if they are talking about, I have X amount of uniques that I can reach against your small audience. Outside of that, to drive a new to file type of member, okay, well, how many are matched? Is that a 1-to-1? Just understanding the landscape is really important to being able to derive exactly what a vendor's actual capability that they can provide to the business. I think the other big thing is testing and testing quickly. So a lot of times an advertiser wants 100% statistical significance. They want to know at 100% that this is going to benefit their media plan or their marketing. 70% is good enough. Test quickly, learn quickly, and iterate. I think those things are really important because a lot of vendors do some really great things. One thing I always keep going back to right now is the shift from the DSP or the self-serve space back to actually vendors who are managing it for you. And the reason being is the reason why we even went to the DSP space to begin with was because of lack of transparency. But now these vendors have to be transparent to partake in the space, and going back to that space where they have really good models and really good algorithms to help you get to that bottom line number that you need to get is actually going back to that. So self-managed platforms, where it's derived for transparency, they don't do the modeling as well. They weren't inherently built on that. So it's a little bit of a different shift that I am seeing today in actually trying to move away from. If you're going to provide transparency, great. That's all that I need at this point.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. I think that as you look at the sales cycle, so if I'm outside and I'm trying to sell into a marketer and I have a platform or this is my focus, I think there's a couple of things. You have to really understand their landscape, so you're going to have to understand their technology stack and what it would take to implement your solution, because it's not as easy as just saying, oh, it's great and it could do this, but what are all the hurdles? And then to your point, am I just a point solution and I'm going to give it over to you and hope that your team can implement it? Or am I a consultant that's going to not only help you do that from an implementation standpoint, but then teach you how to manage the platform, how to point it at a specific problem, how to do the analysis, and then get the promise of machine learning, which is to actually have the damn thing learn and then get better as we go. So the question becomes, what are you? Where are you in that value equation? And then, there's agencies like us who do part of that, but do you complement those? Are you competitive with those? Where do you sit? And I think if you can be clear there, then buyers are going to be much more receptive to the sale.
What are you going to get versus what are you not going to get? I think just the honesty factor plays huge into that.
Yeah, right. Because the mythology around this is so vast that there has to be certain debunking and demythologizing that's part of the process. We need to know what this can't do yet, the limitation of the machine. I've got a wrap question, but before I get to it, I wanted to ask if anybody had any questions of Charity and Ben. Yeah, back here.
John from Springboks. I've been exploring AI and marketing for about the last 9 months, and the analogy that seems to work for me is we're at the state of, in driving, of the self-parking button, but we're not to autonomous driving yet. What is it going to take for us to get to the state of AI and marketing where it's an automated process? And when we do, what's that going to do to the marketing organizations that now have separate functions managing each channel, where the system is actually going to be able to self-optimize that for customers?
I would say, in my opinion, it's when companies have the full stack, then the integrations will be better. So if you're feeding data from one place to your AI system, there's a break there. But if you have a full stack system that accomplishes everything that you need to accomplish, and that system does everything well, I think that's when it'll be more automated.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we're going to see in the next 3 to 5 years, the main focus is going to be on hyper-personalization. It's going to be really around messaging. And so that will change the marketing organization, but not in a way that is so drastic that we won't know what it looks like. We'll have different titles, and people will probably be maybe a little bit smarter in terms of, there's a couple data scientists running around talking about stuff that we don't really understand, but overall, it's going to look very similar. I think that the biggest shift is that when we start to take this to less about messaging and much more about experiences, that's where things get really different. So my favorite example is Google DeepMind. They've been doing all kinds of stuff. So they've with AlphaGo, they've beaten the world's best Go player, which is something that they said would really never happen. But the most impressive thing that they did is they actually took they took an Atari game, Breakout. So it's, there's a paddle, there's a ball, and there's bricks that you have to break. And their goal was, could they teach this game how to play? And instead of trying to use rules, all they did was they said, hey, they taught the game. They said, there's a score, and that's what you need to optimize to. And to do that, you need to move the pixels around on the in the game and see what you can do to maximize that. Well, in about a day, it got pretty good. 2 days, it got great. And within 3 days, I think it found a move that no human had ever figured out, beat the game, and got the highest score, which is pretty cool. But what's even cooler is then they took that exact same algorithm, and then they just unleashed it on 37 other games, and it did the exact same thing without them having to teach it anything different. So why the hell am I telling you about this? Because everything we do today is based on pixels. So if I can start to say, hey, AI or machine learning, what I need you to optimize towards is emotion, and I can look at somebody's face and actually read their emotion, then what the AI does is it starts to change the pixels on the page. And it just actually constructs exactly what that person needs to either make them laugh, cry, smile, or at the end of the day, buy something. And that is where it's going. That's the really scary part. I mean, we're talking 6 to 10 years there, but that is the fundamental shift in terms of creating experiences versus just messaging.
I wanted to, actually, I sort of want to punctuate on the first part of what you said, that you think that for the next 4 or 5 years, hyper-personalization is where we're probably going to see the most impact here. And that leads to my wrap question, which is machine learning AI simply the next iteration of computing? In that it's going to impact everyone, and everyone's going to have to learn this because it's going to be a part of the automation of everybody's system. We're simply going to see automation come up higher in the organization than it ever has before. It's going to impact everyone. So does everybody need an AI machine learning strategy, a way of thinking about these technologies, how they're probably going to impact their business now? Or are we really looking at a farther horizon where we're going to see these technologies impact certain categories before others, and maybe some categories not at all for quite a while?
I'd say if you haven't started, you're probably behind because it takes a long time to implement. So I would say the first thing, if you haven't started, get started. The second thing I would add is, as marketers or whatever you do, you have to make the decision to either jump on or jump off. And it's better to be able to jump on, get an understanding of it, and find out what you're good and what you can complement with. Like you mentioned before, being able to decipher those insights into actionable executions, that's not something that will likely be able to happen very soon within AI. So if you understand the insight side from a marketing perspective, then you'll probably do very well. But in order to do that, you have to understand the AI. So I would say jump on board or move industries.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I mean, if you have a data strategy, you have to have an AI and ML strategy. If you don't have a data strategy, you don't have a business. So, I mean, I think those two things are pretty connected. So I would say absolutely. I mean, there's no way to go about it without that. And then to your point of, is this just the next iteration of computing? I think that's a question that people often point to this and they say, well, you know, as you talk about job displacement, you know, there was a horse and then the car put the horse out of business. And then we've evolved from there, and, you know, and now the internet. The fundamental difference is that all of those elements of change took some sort of human interaction and some sort of human programming at the base level. You know, the car never created another car by itself that optimized itself every single day. And that's the difference that we're going to see, is that the pace of change will be exponential because these systems actually get better. And that's why I think it's much bigger than what we're talking about. And to get ahead of it, you can't get ahead of it. You just have to be a part of it and have a strategy is probably the best way to start.
Thank you for leaving us with that Skynet vision.